Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey with your host, Dave Westcott. The Entrepreneurial Journey is a weekly podcast that streams live every Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific on Dave's YouTube channel and LinkedIn profile. Now here's Dave with this week's episode.
Good morning and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Westcott, and I have with me this morning special guest, Pastor Andrew Munoz, co-lead pastor at New Life Church in Everett, Washington. Good morning, Pastor.
How are you doing, Dave? Today? How you doing, man?
I'm doing outstanding. All right. So in our kind of pre-meeting discussions, you mentioned from the pulpit that you were going to run a marathon. You're going to run, I think as you said, May 3rd, the Tacoma City Marathon.
That's
Is that correct?
Circled on my calendar.
And that's on Sunday, right?
It's a Sunday. I get to take a day off. Praise God.
That's nice. I'm glad that you're able to do that. I am going to be running the Indy Mini on May 2nd, the day before, which is the Indianapolis 500 Marathon, where you run the track and run all through Indianapolis. So it's supposed to be a pretty cool one. So we'll be running at the same time. But I got to know, why are you running this marathon? Why are you doing this to yourself?
I know, man. Why do runners run, right? I feel like running is like a love-hate relationship. Like you hate it when you're doing it, but you love the way you feel after. So I think that's part of the motivation. Yeah, I mean, primarily I'm just doing it for health and vitality, just trying to stay healthy and continue to take care of my body. And so I've done a couple half marathons, probably like 6 or 7 years ago now, but I've always had the goal of wanting to do the full. And so I think this is the year to do it. I just turned 40, and I told myself at age 40, I wanted to be done with my master's and I wanted to run a marathon. And I've accomplished one of those goals, and now I'm about to accomplish the second one.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Yeah. When are you training now?
I am training now.
What does your training program look like during the week?
I'm doing that. There's a guy by the name of Hal Higdon. He's been around for a long, long time, avid runner. So I'm doing his like novice running program. So it's like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you run like, 4, 5, 6 miles, and then you take a rest day. Friday, maybe another 4 or 5, and then Saturday is like your long run. So I think last weekend, I did 7 miles. So I'm up to 7 right now. So it just kind of builds and tacks up week in, week out. So I usually run about 5 days a week.
Oh, that's cool. So here's my training methodology that I've used all the way along on my marathon journey. And so I run Monday for 30 minutes. That's it. And then, no, excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't run on Mondays. What am I talking about? Yes, I do run on Mondays. What am I talking about? Yeah, I run Mondays for 30 minutes, and then Tuesday is off. And then Wednesday is another run for 30 minutes. And then Thursday is a walk day. And then Saturday is a long run. And so, I've been running for a while. Typically don't do anything under 10. So like I'll do maybe a 10-mile run and, maybe a 12-mile run. And if I want to break it up, maybe I'll do a 10-mile run on a Saturday and maybe an 8-mile run on a Sunday. Like this last Saturday, I did 7.5 on Saturday and then 8.5 on Sunday. And and then yesterday, bike. So, but that's basically the methodology that I followed, and my goal is always to run 100 miles in a month. And within that month, I always want to run either a half marathon, a full marathon, or an ultra marathon, some sort of race once a month to kind of get my, blood going and get out there and feel it and so forth. And so that's the path
Nice
that
job,
I've been
man.
on, for the last 12 months. Yeah, thank you. My journey has moved more into triathlons. So now I'm into the triathlon and I'm training for a half Ironman that I'm going to do on June 21st. And so what that looks like is that training is bike on Mondays, so an hour bike. And then today I'll probably do like a half an hour walk and then maybe an hour swim. And then tomorrow I'll do another run, and that's probably like an hour run. And then Thursday, probably another bike. And then Friday, a swim. And then Saturday, a long run. So probably 10 miles on a Saturday. So that's basically where my training has evolved to since I got going.
Way to go, man.
Yeah, it's good. You know what? It's good for the health and it's good for the mind. And I would say one of the number one things that I picked up from running marathons and marathon training was, I don't know if you listen to books on tape, but I listen to the Bible on tape. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you that listening to the Bible on tape has been one of the biggest impacts of my life, starting from start to finish and really listening to the words. You're out there on the run. You're all alone. There's nobody with you. You might be at mile 8 and you're dying and you're listening to what's happening. And I feel like it brings the Bible to a whole new perspective, a whole new place. And I'll tell you that you read the stories in the Bible and you get snippets from church, and maybe you read a chapter in the morning or whatever you do. Maybe you read more, you're a pastor, I don't know. But at the end of the day, as you go through that process, you really see there's a lot of brutality in there. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of not messing around. There is a lot of God not messing around. Mm-hmm. And I wonder sometimes, even if you say you're a Christian and you follow the Lord, if you really will get to heaven. I wonder. And on my last run, or one of my last runs, I was listening to I can't remember if it was Kings or what, but they're talking about the story of David, and David makes this mistake. He counts his men, right? He goes out and he counts his men. You probably know the story. He goes out and counts his men, and the Lord gives him 3 options. And he chooses the option that says, hey, Lord, do what you want. And the Lord strikes a plague on Israel, and they pray and they ask for forgiveness. And I think it's something like 70,000 people die for counting the men. 70,000 people died for counting the men. That is no joke.
Yeah, man.
And I wonder about the little sins that are made every single day that are, I mean, I guess all sins are equal, but I would imagine, wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Any thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of thoughts. One, I love what you're talking about in terms of listening to the Bible. Specifically, when I run, I don't listen or have anything in my ears, and I do that just because I have a lot of noise in my life right now because I have 3 young kids and a wife, and I work full time. So there's just a lot of noise, and so for me, I find running is like my time to be with the Lord in solitude and in quiet. But what I in what you're saying, Dave, about listening to the Bible versus reading it, I would say I've heard that from a lot of people that that when you hear something in the scriptures, it's actually different than when you're reading it, especially if you're familiar maybe with some of the stories, that it just hits you in a different way. Things stand out to you in a different way than they would if you're reading it. So I think that's spot on there. But yeah, I think when you look at, if you read the Bible or listen to it in its entirety, I mean, obviously, I think you're going to see that, especially in the Old Testament, you're going to see a God that is just, a God that is jealous, a God that is full of wrath, and that a God that takes sin very seriously. And so, there are things like the counting of the men and other stories where you have to ask yourself, okay, what is it about this story that makes me learn about my own sin and my own failures? And do I take sin this seriously? Because I mean, obviously, God takes sin very seriously. And we, I think, in our modern days and times, maybe take a little bit light or have a little bit of a lack of reverence and awe for the righteousness of God really is.
Yeah, that's true. I like it because the truth is we're made in God's image. So if you've ever had a moment where you blew up, maybe don't feel so bad about it, because since we're made in God's image, he has a few moments where he blows up too. And it's okay, because we're made like that, and it's okay to have a little moment of anger, if you will. But I like it, man. So what is it? So what is it that drew you to become a pastor? I mean, this seems like you hear a lot of stories about pastoral burnout. You hear a lot of, unchurching. What is it called you to pastor?
Yeah, man, I love this question. I mean, I think primarily it just started with my parents and my upbringing. So my mom and dad were pastors, and they had a church, and so I was what you would call like a pastor's kid. But my story and my journey didn't really start with like a church building or this like large congregation or all of these people. My parents just pastored a small home church, like what we would call just a home church today. 20, maybe 30 people, barely any kids, not a lot of families. But we just met in our home, and so my brother would, play the guitar and sing the songs. My mom and dad would teach and give the word. And so, but what that did for me is I just saw my mom and dad really just love all kinds of people. And my parents' church wasn't like, there were some, I guess I would say, that maybe were affluent or maybe a little bit better off. But primarily my parents' church were people that were, what you would say today's standards, like just, maybe low or middle class, a lot of brokenness, a lot of difficulties and hardships. And I just saw my mom and dad love people. As the scripture says, I saw my mom and dad just shepherd the flock and care for them with compassion. And it was really through that I just was like, if my parents can love people like this and they can show them the love of Jesus, that I just want to do what they're doing. And so that's like more of the spiritual side of maybe what we would call like the pastoral calling or the calling that God put on my life. But then on the practical side, I have just always been a lover of people. I've just always been able to get along with all kinds of people. And I think those two things really kind of set me towards wanting to pastor and serve the church. Because I think if you want to pastor or you want to be in ministry, in any vocational sense, I think you should really know how to love people. And you're not good with people, then I would steer far away from pastoring.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you love people. Your parents are pastors. You're raised in the home church. That sounds kind of fun and cool. You watched your parents love on people and all kinds of people. And then you take that, you harness it, and you say, well, you know what? I'm a lover of people. And so I want to do this same thing. I want to go into the pastoral ministry. Now, this can be kind of hard. You hear a lot about some pastoral burnout. And somebody who's not a pastor, I would have a really hard time understanding what pastoral burnout means. Like, I think, what does that mean? And how do you get burned out? So I wonder, as you're on this journey, you said you're 40 years old. What is pastoral burnout? What is that? And then I'm wondering, what do you do to ensure that you don't get that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think pastoral burnout is a crisis of faith for a pastor and a leader who really has not done their due diligence in, one, creating margin and daily routines and rhythms. I think pastoral burnout can come in all shapes and sizes. It could be the demands of the church, could be the pressure of the current realities that particular congregation is facing. Sometimes burnout takes place on undue pressure that we put on ourselves as pastors, that I need to perform well, or I need to preach great sermons, or I need to be available at all times to all people, almost like a little bit of a savior complex. Like I am people's God. I am the mouthpiece for them to hear from the Lord. So I think there can be outside pressures. I think there can be internal pressures that can create burnout, that can create hardships. Obviously, certain physical issues or health problems or things happening personally in a pastor's family or marriage can create burnout. So there's probably not one avenue that happens. There's different factors and different facets as to how burnout can happen. And I think it happens a lot because primarily pastors are terrible at having boundaries. They're not very well at setting themselves up for, like I said, good rhythms of rest and routine, of retreat and solitude, of personal devotion to God. And so I think that can be the cause of a lot of that burnout. Just the stresses that are put on a pastor from a church.
Those are all very good.
Or even pressure.
Those are all very good.
And then your second question was, how do I avoid it? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I came to the realization early on in ministry that, this was from like a mentor that told me this. It's always stuck with me. And that was that, Jesus died for the church and I don't have to, right? Jesus has already died for the church and he's the church's savior. I am not. And so that is the lens by which I've always operated ministry from. And so what I mean by that is I've just made a conscious choice to, I will not sacrifice, my marriage on the altar of the church. My children will know their father and I will be a great dad to them. And I will prioritize my family and my relationship, with them. And I think part of what has sustained me all these years is just a fierce personal devotion and identity that I have in Christ, that I really feel that as I wake up every day and pursue God's calling on my life, before I pursue his calling or before I even open up his word, before I look to maybe write sermons or care and pastor people, I wake up with the assurance that I'm a son and child of God. And that is my identity. And my identity is not wrapped in what I do for a church. My identity is not wrapped in my career or how I provide for my family. Ultimately, my identity is in the death, burial, and resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus. And so for me, I have just found a lot of security and validation in being a son of God and starting from that place every day. And then having great boundaries and great margin, great routines and rhythms of rest and retreat so that I don't burn out. And there's been things along the years I've done. I only work one night a week out more than a week. I say no to many opportunities as I'm raising kids right now with my wife. And so there's just little things I've done over the years that have just allowed me to stay healthy and avoid that burnout that we're talking about.
Yeah, that sounds good. I like that you create the boundaries and the routines. That makes a healthy life. And I think that's kind of cool. You said you're not going to sacrifice your marriage and you're not going to sacrifice your children, and your children are going to know their dad. I think that that's a big deal. I do the same thing in my life. Those are things that I would set for myself, right? I would say these things are important and I'm not going to sacrifice them for my job. Work, no matter what work you do, is a rubber ball. You can bounce in it, it will always come back. But your family, your marriage, your children, these are glass balls. If you break them, they shatter. You never get to put them back together. So I think that's smart the way that you go about that. So New Life Church in Everett, that's a pretty big church, right? I mean, I'm guessing a couple thousand people go to that church. Am I wrong, right? Is that about what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a larger congregation for sure, in terms of its, its makeup. Absolutely.
That's cool. Now, are you a founding pastor of this church? Have you guys started this church?
No, so this church has been in the community for, 80, 90 plus years. It's gone through a series of different pastors over the years. And so I've been with this church now for about 4.5 years, going on 5 years in May. But no, I was not the
Okay.
founding
So
pastor
you
of
were
the church.
hired. You were pastoring somewhere else, and they said, "Hey, look it, we've got this opportunity." And then you met with the board. You went through all of these processes, and then this became home base.
Hmm. You got it.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So you come into a new church, and I bet they have a lot of things like, I'll just call them sacred cows. They have a lot of these sacred cows, a lot of things they've done for a long time that are
Mhm.
kind of like tradition. And you got a lot of old elders and leaders, and things are kind of established in that way. And I would say that's very similar to business, where a president or CEO comes into a business, but they and maybe it was retirement of a previous pastor, maybe something wasn't going right, maybe. But what I would wonder is, when you step into that role and you know that you've got all of these things in front of you, you've got all of these things that are happening from a leadership perspective, how do you align that staff, or did you align that staff? Or maybe you just fired everybody and brought in new staff. I don't know, probably didn't, but but how did you step into that as a leader and align that team to get all arrows pointing in the same direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good observation. I think it applies to any field you're in, whether it be ministry, business, any job or career. You're going to have this. I think great leaders coming in new to need to establish and build trust with people. I mean, I think you can go about it in a different way. I'll give you the negative one. I think you can go into a business and you can blow the thing up immediately, fire everybody, change everything, and just make everybody mad and light the place on fire, and then try to rebuild it. I think that's one way of doing it. Um, I just think that's dangerous. I think that's cold. I think that's mean spirited. And I think you become an intimidating and fearful leader that nobody wants to follow or be around. But I've seen leaders do that. I've seen pastors do that. And that's a model out there that I think is pretty popular. I would say that I'm not that kind of a leader. I am a driven leader. I am a strong leader. I can be aggressive, and I am a bold leader. But I think if you're going to make change in a church or a business, and you're going to try to align vision and values and missions, then you would do best to listen with both your ears and learn the important lesson of closing your mouth. And you're going to learn to listen. And as you listen, you learn what people love, and you learn what people value. You learn what people care about. And I think if you look at it from a long viewpoint, almost back to the marathon thing, that this is a marathon, not a 5K or a sprint, then if you look at it from a longevity perspective, if you can build the kind of trust and vulnerability and authenticity within an organization, then I think when you do know you need to make those changes are much easier because you've brought people along, you've established unity, you've established alignment, you've established trust, you've communicated well, you're loving and caring for your staff or your employees. And I think if you can create that baseline, then I believe the changes are much easier. You're taking the mountain and the hill per se, as a team rather than so people are wanting to follow you and they're wanting to come alongside you because you have listened first and you value their opinion. I guess the only caveat to that example would be if it's not viable and there's tons of financial problems and you can't even pay the bills every month and you have to lay people off and you have to cut your losses in order to establish a baseline, then I would say that those hard decisions are necessary. But a lot of times we're inheriting things that are viable, that sometimes are stable, but they just need some change and some new direction. And I think going about it maybe a little bit slower than what we would want ultimately creates more buy-in and trust.
I love it. I love the way that you approached it. Listen first, some active listening, some building some trust, building a rapport with people, leading alongside them. And, I got to imagine that when you walk into a church setting as the new guy, you're 36 when you walk in. So some people are going to say, man, who is this kid, this guy? He's so young. What is he going to do? How's he going to do it? Right. I mean, I know that. Right. And then some people are going to say the music's too loud. Or we've always worshiped like this. Now we're worshiping like this. I don't like these songs. We did hymns. Now we're doing contemporary. Or, hey, the lights are too low. They used to be bright in here. I can't see anything. Or, hey, we went from hymnals to songbooks. Or, hey, we had from tithe buckets to tithing online. Like, you've got all these little battles to fight, right? Where all of these people, because you have board, and then you've got deacons, elders. I don't know exactly how you're set up, and then you've got all this congregation. And like church is always 90 minutes long. Why are we at a minute and 15? Or why are we at 2 hours? Like, you've got all these little battles to fight as you step in, and all of these little trust wins that you have to do. And so as you step into that, and also stepping into it as a young leader, because 36 to come in, I know in some people's mind is young. Now, to somebody who's 36, they feel like, oh, I got it. To somebody who's older, they think, oh man, maybe they've got it. But when you walk into that and you're preparing for that leadership, how are you tackling those changes, those things? This is the way we've always done it, and this is what's been successful for 80 years, and who is this guy changing it? I want to understand how you overcome that, because it's the same whether you're overcoming it in a church, or you're overcoming it in a business, or you're even overcoming it in your family life, right? There's little sacred cows that happen. How do you tackle those things?
I mean, I think there's so many ways of going about this, Dave. Part of my journey and story at New Life is, when I was on staff as like an associate, or whatever you would say, an assistant pastor. Then we had a pastoral transition that was not a good situation. I then kind of became the interim. Then we brought in a couple other pastors, and now I help co-lead the church with a few other people. But I would say that those kind of changes that you're talking about are difficult, because everybody has their preferences, right? And everybody thinks that, like you mentioned, music, that the hymns are the songs of heaven, and that's what we're going to sing when Jesus returns, right? And so I think you're never going to get away from people's preferences in the ministry world, let alone in the business world. People want things done a certain way, and they feel like this is the way to do them. But ultimately, I believe it's about mission and vision communication. What I mean by that is, in my profession, I believe healthy churches should be reaching people who are far from Jesus Christ. And I call them worthy to be found. The way that we wake up, we are encountering people, and you mentioned that we're all made in the image of God. We are encountering people every single day who are made in the image of God and are worthy to be found. And so I think you got to get people to arise above the preferences of the church, tithing in envelopes versus tithing online, drums versus no live instrument. Those are all just, in some ways, petty preferences. You got to rise above those preferences and remind people we are here to reach people who are not yet here yet. And if we don't adjust our preferences, the church is going to get older. The congregation is going to get physically older. The building's going to get quieter. We're not going to see children anymore. We're not going to see young families anymore. And the path for this church is pretty bleak if we can't get and move aside our preferences and remind ourselves why we're really here. And that is for your grandchildren to know Jesus and to one day be the pastors of these churches and leaders of this church. So I think it's pointing people to a vision and a preferred future that gets them outside of the pettiness of these preferences that tend to kind of eat pastors alive. And then ultimately, I think you have to prepare yourself for the losses and the changes, or how much trust you built, no matter how well you communicate it, no matter how much you love people, you're ultimately just going to lose people that aren't going to stay for those changes. And because change is hard, no matter how slow you take it. So I think you have to spiritually and mentally prepare yourself that they may not all come with you.
It's very, very interesting that you lead with the mission, the vision, and the communication. I think those are keys out there. And I think people can take those keys into their personal life. Like, you need to have a mission in your family. You need to have vision in your family. You need to have good communication in your family, spouse, children, etc. You need to have this same thing in business. Just a couple of interesting statistics. Some business sites, like the Small Business Administration, would say that 595,000 U.S. businesses close annually. And if you look at the same figure against churches, Lifeway Research estimates that 4,000 Protestant churches closed in 2024. Some other data would say that the number is potentially higher, between 4,000 and 10,000 churches may have actually closed, and potentially 7,700 places of worship were closing each year prior to 2020. So it doesn't matter if you're in business. Right? It does not matter if you're in business, right? I read yesterday that 8,250 some locations are going to close in malls just this year alone in retail, 8,250 locations. And I look at all of that closure, and then I look at divorce rate amongst non-Christian people. I think it's 50%. Every 50% of the time, 1 out of every 2 is going to get divorced. And you look at those things, those are big numbers. Those are big numbers in business. Those are big numbers in marriage. Those are big numbers in church. Now there's new business starting every day, and there's new churches starting every day. There's new marriages starting every day. So we always have new, right? Thank God we always have a new thing. But I would wonder, what would you share and what would your perspective be on how do you take that vision? Because with lack of vision, we perish in everything we do. And what would be some core leadership lessons that you would share with this audience? 3 million people have watched this show over the last 12 months. What would you say are the key leadership principles of vision, whether you're in church leadership, whether you're in business, or whether you're at home? How do you do that? Because you articulated it very well, and I love what you said. Like, we've got to get over the little nuances, and if we don't get over the little nuances, we're just going to perish. Like, the end is bleak, I think, is what you said. But the end is bleak in marriage, and the end is bleak in business, and the end is as bleak at church. If we don't have vision, if we don't have mission, and then we don't communicate that and create a cascading message that teaches all. How do we take that and put that into our own lives, our own businesses?
Yeah, I think it's a really spot on question. I think it's going to look differently for every person. If someone has a struggling marriage, and they're on the brink of divorce, I mean, obviously, I think there's steps that marriage in particular is going to have to take to rekindle and realign that marriage. I mean, that marriage might need outside counseling. It might need marriage retreats or marriage, seminars. It might need some type of outside support to really come in and address those issues that are happening in that marriage. And the same can go for a business or a church. There's organizations and there's companies that can provide, really strong evidence and helpful tools to come in and assess what is our company facing, what are the crises that we need to change, what are the fires we need to put out, and begin to create a plan for that. But I think it does start, not to reiterate it, it does start with a clear and compelling vision. And so I think for any organization or any marriage, any family, any church, it's going to start with a clear and concise vision for a pursued for future. And I think that's something that needs prayer. I think that needs time away to really kind of nail down what it is that you're assessing and what it is that you really need to change. And then from there, I think it's building a team of people that you've built trust with that are now working towards making, those changes. And so I would say, I guess to the world of the church, let's say you have a church that has 15 programs and they all are good programs, but let's say none of them are growing. They're all bleeding the general fund of the church. Half of them are just reaching the wrong people in terms of its, future vision. We're trying to reach new people for Christ. Then again, you're going to probably have to make some hard changes to say, hey, we're going to have to cut this program, and this for these reasons. And we're going to have to allocate our resources to these things. We're going to have to stop all these things, and start a few new things because of just the nature of where this, this church and this ministry is currently at. So I think it's going to look differently for every single person. And I don't think it's going to be a one size fit all because each person, each family is going to have different nuances and different challenges, than others. So it's probably not a clean cut answer I could give, in terms of other than a clear and concise vision.
I love the vision. And let me get this right. So the vision of New Life is we are made in the image of God. Let's go find worthy to be found people. Is that right?
Let me give you the vision of New Life. I was just kind of sharing some of my core values as a person. The vision of New Life is to make Jesus known. That is our vision. Those 3 words: make Jesus known. And we have a little bit of a longer phrase: make Jesus known where we work, play, and live. That's really the vision of the church. And if you Googled the website. And then we have some core values, 6 core values that we follow. So, if I look at that vision, make Jesus known where we work, play, and live, I have to ask myself, are the people that we're supporting and coming and who would call New Life home, are they making Jesus known in their marriage? And if we ask, well, what does that look like? Well, to make Jesus known in your marriage is to follow the ways of Jesus. Well, what did Jesus do? Well, Jesus laid down his life for the sheep. Jesus said, if anybody would deny himself, he must take up his cross daily and follow hard after me. So I would ask any husband and wife, how are you making Jesus known in your marriage? Are you serving your spouse? Are you laying down your life for your spouse? In what ways, practically, are you helping your spouse in being a sacrificial person and modeling servanthood? I would say if you have 2 people in a marriage that are serving each other in love and following that sacrificial way of Jesus, that marriage is going to thrive. That marriage is going to be successful because you have 2 people willing to serve each other towards Christ. Same goes towards, kids. Are you making your kids it just kind of falls out from all those different things. So I would say those are the practical sides.
I love that. So serving your wife or serving your husband, whatever, depending on what side of the spectrum you're on, in year 1, maybe not that difficult. In year 15, year 25, it's a little more challenging, I think, to serve, right? I think, you get into the mundane ruts of life. What are some ways that either spouse can serve their spouse after they've been married for a while, and after, it's just the same rigmarole? We take the kids to school, and we get groceries on Sunday, and we watch the Seahawks game, and we go to work, and blah blah blah. Right? What are some ways that service can be driven through?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Great questions, Dave. I come home every day and just ask my wife Amanda, hey, what can I do to help? That's the number 1 question I ask in my marriage. What can I do to help? And sometimes it's a laundry list of things she has for me. And sometimes I just find creative ways to help. I'll give you just some more practical examples. This past Saturday, we had a pretty full day. My kids are playing sports. My wife had a birthday party to take the kids, and we had a worship night at our church that night on Saturday night. And so she left the house around 3 o'clock, and I didn't have to be at the church till about 4:30. So I had about an hour and a half of free time before I had to leave the house. And our downstairs was this absolute disaster. I mean, there's shoes all over the entryway. There's gum wrappers and candy wrappers, and there's schoolwork everywhere. We homeschool our kids, and there's dishes piling up all over the sink. And my wife just leaving with all 3 kids. She's like, "Bye, babe. I'm sorry the house is a mess." And she takes off. And so, man, I turned on some instrumental worship music, and man, I could have sat on my butt for 90 minutes and just served myself. But bro, I just cleaned the whole downstairs of the house. I didn't get to the upstairs and do all the laundry, but I put all the shoes away. I swept the floor. I did all the dishes. I cleaned, I took all the garbages out, organized all the blankets and the pillows on the couch, and wrote a little love note on my wife on the little faucet. I love you very much. Have a great night. And, my wife came home and she thought I had hired a cleaning service because the house looked so good. And so I'm like, come on, baby, points taken. And I'm not saying that to brag, Dave. I'm just saying like that. My wife didn't even ask me to do that. I just knew that she would love to come home to a clean downstairs. And it only took me an hour, but that's just my heart to serve our family and to serve her. And so that's just one way of 1,000 ways, man, that I think if we had that kind of attitude in business, how can I serve my staff and my employees? If we had that attitude in the church, how can I serve this congregation and make him known in what I say and what I do? If there's no job too big for you, that you would just be willing to lay down your life for your staff and your employees, man, service and love of people, that is the way forward. People don't need flashy. They don't need your charismatic presence or your foo-foo and all the nonsense. They just want real people with real values that really do care and are willing to serve. And man, I feel like we would see churches turn around, we would see businesses turn around, we would see marriages turn around because we're not choosing ourselves first. It's the humility way, right? It's thinking of yourself less and choosing someone to go before you.
I love that. Real people with real values, real people that care.
That's it, man.
I like that, and I love the example that you gave. I mean, getting down there and busting out the basement, man. That's a good way to do it. That's a good way to do it. I love that the church has core values. So we worship Jesus. We live by God's Spirit. We are all for people. We work in progress. We are better together. We have fun. Those are the core values. Those are 6 core values of the church. With those core values, how did you create those core values? Was that a leadership team that got together and said, these are the things that we believe in and so on and so forth? Walk me through a little bit about how those core values were created and how you actually live those out in the church.
I mean, I think this is where the real work begins. We're talking about making a clear and concise vision for a future. We're talking about core values and making values that the church can align to. I think this is where the real work begins. For us, it was like a leadership retreat that we went on for a couple of days, off-site, away from the day-to-day, away from the noise of the hustle and bustle of the church. And we, as followers of Jesus, we pray, spend some time even fasting, spend some time in worship and song, devotion time, solitude, and community together. And it's there you start getting out the whiteboards, notepads, you start praying and you start throwing things on walls and you start asking yourself, all right, if you were a startup and you were coming to a church, starting a church brand new, what kind of church would you want to start? And that's how we look at transforming or changing a old church, maybe that needs to be revitalized or needs to have a new look or new feel. You start asking yourself those kind of questions. If you were a pastor, if you were a CEO, if you were a business leader, and you were not starting something from scratch, but inheriting something, but you looked at it as you were starting it from scratch, what changes would you make? What would you want this thing to be about? What things would you want to be known for? What characteristics would you want people to say about your organization, about you as a person, about your team? And so that's how it started for us. We're starting to throw things, on a whiteboard. We want, probably went through, 10 or 15 different iterations of of the vision of the church. Different people said, different phrases, different language, different words, and no, I don't like that, not like that. All right, let's go eat and play some racquetball. We'll come back and try again. So it's just this fluid, ongoing thing where you're engaging with the team and you're building collaboration and creativity, and you're starting to identify those kind of things.
The church is good about taking time to restore, taking time to reflect. For leaders out there who are growing, who are building, who are working to be intentional, what would be your blueprint for rest and restoration in personal life and in business life?
Yeah, another great one, Dave. And I think, I would just say, I think this is a word from the Lord today. I would say this to everybody listening to this, and even for you and I, Dave. I believe we need to turn down the noise in our lives right now. I believe that we need to get back to what the psalmist says in Psalms 46:10, where he says, "Be still and know that I am God." I think we live, and there's nothing shocking about what I'm going to say here, but I'm going to say it. We live in the most chaotic and loudest and noisiest generation of our lives right now. This is the loudest generation and the noisiest generation we've ever seen, from social media to news outlets to these stupid little devices. We are consistently plugged in, and I believe the way forward for a healthy soul and a cultivated life built on the ways of Jesus, but also in healthy business practice, is to learn to turn your phone off, learn to turn off notifications, learn to use all of your vacation time every year, learn to journal, learn to pray, learn to exercise, and literally go periods of time in your life where you're not listening to anything or anyone, but you are just listening to your very soul breathe. I believe that's one of the blueprints moving forward to have a sustainable business, church, marriage, family. I think it's a tragedy when you go to a restaurant in our world today, and every person at that table is on a device, staring at a device, rather than talking and staring at each other. That tells me there's something seriously wrong with the fabric of the family when people are no longer even engaging in personal conversation, sitting across from people at the table. So I think it starts there. It starts, it's literally treating our devices like they're a child, and we have to parent our own devices. And I mean, another practical example, I put my phone to bed at 8 p.m. every night. That's right. I literally have a bedtime for my phone. It goes upstairs on the charger at 8 p.m. The phone goes to bed and doesn't get picked up until after my devotional time the next day. So that's just, again, another one practical way of, I think we need to get quiet again, get silent again, and get used to being still before God.
All right. I love it. You brought the fire. That was off the charts. And I will tell you this, for many years, my phone goes away at 6 p.m. when I walk in the door from work, and I don't look at it until after devotions in the morning myself. It is, 9:47, and I have still not looked at my phone. I have still not checked an email, because there is nothing in there that is going to help me with my day. And so I'm a big believer in that. And I want to just say that what you have shared, I think, is very powerful. Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. Turn off your phone, turn off the notifications, learn to journal, learn to pray or focus on prayer, exercise, take some time, be quiet, and listen to your soul breathe and listen to God. Put that phone away and follow Pastor Andrew's advice. 8 p.m., 6 p.m., whenever it is, turn that phone off. Spend devotional, intentional time with God, with family, with friends. And when you go out to eat, put your phone down, put it in the pocket. I actually like to leave it in the car. My wife and I do a date day on Wednesdays, and the goal is no phones. We do not take our phones so that we can actually have a conversation. Otherwise, we're going to get bombarded with notifications and Instagram and all that. So I love the time that we've spent together. Did I encapsulate that? Did I get that?
I think so, man. I really enjoyed hanging out with you, Dave. I appreciate the time.
It's been fantastic. I have one final question before we go. We've got a big billboard, a whiteboard. It's on the side of the road. You can put one phrase, one word, one sentence to share with the world. What would that be?
Serve one another in love.
Serve one another in love. And you said that with confidence. You didn't even have to hesitate. It was just there. You had it ready to roll. All right. If you are in Everett, Washington, or the Everett area, check out the church, New Life Church. Check them out. See what they're doing. Sounds like an amazing church. Sounds like an amazing place to be. This has been absolutely fantastic show. We are back 9:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every single Tuesday. This has been the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Westcott. Give us a like, give us a share, drop your comments into the comment box. Pastor Andrew, thank you very much for your time today. It's been absolutely wonderful to hang out with you.
Thank you, Dave.
Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.